You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, and co-host, Keelan Harvey on Alternative Talk AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage experts, Tina Mitchell and Keelan Harvey.
You are listening to The Money Hour on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, May 1st show. You can also listen to us on podcast or catch our Facebook premiere show. I am your host, Tina Mitchell, flying solo without my co-host, Keelan, today. We bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in our local market on everything regarding your money. Why? Because we're here to help you in today's economy. And now in studio, Robert Curtis of Business Group Resources, what 95% of qualified business owners do not know, right here on 1150 AM KKNW. Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me here, Tina. Appreciate it.
So I know everybody that's been listening to the show and has heard the intros and outros. What is it that 95% of qualified business owners do not know?
Well, let me tell you where that tagline comes from and what the story is. If you remember, a little while before President Trump came into office in 2015, Carrier Air Conditioning in Indianapolis was talking about moving their factory to Mexico. And it seemed like suddenly they just found $25 million to get them to stay here. Well, the money didn't just magically appear. What happened is Carrier, as large a company as it is, never bothered to take a tax credit called the R&D tax credit. So that got the Wall Street Journal to thinking, and they did a poll of businesses, and they found that 95% of US businesses with 50 employees or fewer who qualified for the credit didn't know about it or didn't take it. So that's what 95% of the businesses don't know. And
well, before I knew you and invited you into the show, I didn't know what it is. So let's talk about what is the R&D tax credit.
Well, it's sort of a misnomer. Let me give you a tiny bit of history. In 1981, American companies were having a difficult time competing against Japanese manufacturers. So the government instituted a temporary part of the tax code called the R&D, or Research and Development Tax Credit. And it was geared towards small American manufacturing companies to help them keep jobs on our shores and make them more competitive. Well, it was a temporary program that lasted until 2015. And then in 2015, and you got to love government acronyms, they passed the PATH Act, P-A-T-H, Protecting Americans Against Tax Hikes. And in the PATH Act in 2015, they made the R&D tax credit permanent, and they also expanded it significantly. So that at this point, my biggest competitor is the name R&D tax credit. Because when people hear it, they say, well, I never filed for a patent. I never invented anything. But it really should at this point be called the Business Innovation Tax Credit, because you don't need to wear a lab coat or carry around a clipboard to qualify for it. So,
Robert, share, why do we not know about this?
Well, it really is because of the name, because people just, their eyes glaze over and they think, I don't do R&D. But again, it's not R&D as we usually think about it. Another reason is because, as I mentioned when Mary and I were speaking before, the tax code is 74,000 pages long. Nobody can know all of it. And everybody's accountant does a great job. They keep you out of trouble filing your quarterlies, doing your year ends, but most of them are either unaware of the tax credit or they don't have a full or deep understanding of just how rich a credit it is. It's probably the biggest single credit for small and mid-sized American businesses. And again, that is in no way disparaging accountants. They do a great job, but they're generalists. They can't know it all. Nobody can.
Yeah. So, Robert, who qualifies for this credit?
So, I don't want to put you to sleep with the definition, but so a couple of things. Let me tell you who doesn't qualify.
I'll cut you off if I'm starting to fall asleep. How about that?
Okay. Unfortunately, nonprofits don't qualify because they don't pay taxes. It is really meant for companies that solve specific problems for individual clients, where a lot of what they do is a one-off. So something like a real retailer probably wouldn't, because it's product on the shelf, product off the shelf. I work with a lot of dentists and medical practices because, you don't want to think that your doctor is experimenting, but every day he or she listens to your complaint. They need to think, well, what should I diagnose that? And then they need to think about what's the best treatment. And then what's the best medication if they need a medication. And then they have to think about, well, what should the dosage be? And you know how you kind of play around with the dosage till you get it right. So all of that is indeed experimentation or innovation, and it comes under the credit. So medical, dental, chiropractic, physical therapy practices, almost anything in construction, whether it's solar, HVAC, electrical, general contracting. Let's say just a home remodeler. They've got to figure out, so I'm putting a new room on. What's the best way to hook up the electrical? What's the most efficient way to hook up the air conditioning and heating? All of that. And they might say, I'm going to try out this new material, see how that works, or a new construction technique. Things in tech work well. I'm surprised every day at the businesses who do come under it, that it wouldn't even have occurred to me with the experience I have in it.
So assuming that your accountant wouldn't fall into that, even though that they're trying to strategize one-off for each client.
Well, you know what?
Best serve them.
Accountants would come into it. And so would financial advisors, as long as it's not a cookie cutter financial advisor, but somebody who sits down, looks at what your needs are, plans out a portfolio. I'll give you the proviso about who qualifies and who doesn't. It began life as a jobs program to help keep jobs on U.S. shores. So if somebody is a sole proprietor with no employees, it's probably not going to work for them. Usually you want to have at least one W-2 employee. And the more employees that you have, the more it's going to work for you.
Okay. So, Robert, let's talk about how the credit actually works.
Sure. So let me give you the disclaimer that I do business development for the company. I am not a CPA. You would not want to take tax advice from me unless you wanted the federal government to house you for several years at no charge. That being said, it is a dollar for dollar credit for any money that a company has spent toward what qualifies as R&D. So that could be reusable or disposable supplies. It could be new equipment. It's the employee's time. There are a number of things that are covered. Now, if you're a Boeing or a General Dynamics and you're going for hundreds of $millions in R&D credit, the government is looking at specific time records, expense records, the rest of that. But it just wouldn't be profitable for small to mid-sized businesses to go through that. So we have developed an IRS compliant system that essentially goes by what is normal and in a particular industry, and for that particular industry's activities that would be covered by the R&D credit. And we have an intake form. The worst part of this process is somebody has to spend 30 minutes having a conversation with me. That's the toughest part.
I'm sure that wouldn't be tough at all, Robert.
and we'll learn about the business, some of their activities, and we'll get a good sense of whether they qualify. And then we throw it over to our tax team, who's got 17 years of experience just doing this and nothing else.
So when you say tax credit, really dollar for dollar, meaning it's coming off of your income earned on that side of it, yes?
Yes, and the IRS allows you to go back 3 years.
Wow.
So the first thing we will do is go back and do a recovery. And then we can work with your accountant in succeeding years to, instead of recovering at a rebate, to just pay less taxes each year.
Got it. So how difficult is it to get this, Robert?
It's not difficult at all. The process that I use is like a quick 10, 15-minute conversation with somebody to give them the 30,000-foot overview, see if there's an interest. If there is, we'll spend about 30 minutes speaking about the company, learning some of the particulars. And then we have a secure upload of the taxes, corporate and personal taxes. And then in about 2 weeks, this time of year, maybe 3 weeks, we will come, it's tax time, we're busy. We will come back with a free, no obligation, what we call an incentive analysis, saying, hey, this is about what we think we can get back for you. Somebody can choose to walk away and leave thousands on the table, or they can decide to proceed. If they decide to proceed, we work on a contingency basis and take a portion of recovery.
Okay.
So nothing recovered, nothing
Yeah, and
spent.
nothing lost. Sounds like
No.
it sounds like a win-win for sure. So, any concerns that this is going to flag you for an audit?
That's the biggest concern I hear from everybody. And of course, the biggest concession. So when we are going back, looking at previous years, these are numbers that have already been reported to the IRS. And the IRS has seen these numbers and they say, yeah, these are your tax returns. We accept them. Essentially, all we're doing coming back and saying, oh, we need a do-over. We forgot one thing. Well, we forgot to take the R&D tax credit on the numbers already reported. Somebody can get audited for any reason at any time by the IRS. So I could never say, no, you will never get audited. But what we do is, we don't go too close to the guardrails. And this is a program that's been around for 40 years now. And it's a standard part of the IRS rules. So it's not going to trigger an audit in and of itself by any means.
It's so surprising that something that's so great and can benefit so many business owners and save so much on taxes that even majority or a lot of your accountants or CPAs don't know that it exists.
And the government sets aside over,
around.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. The government sets aside over $12 billion a year for the tax credit, and they never spend it all.
Wow. Well, if you're listening to the show, definitely reach out to the show. We can get you connected with Robert if you think that you might benefit. And again, it's, you're not going to pay anything unless you actually receive that benefit. And spending 30 minutes of time with Robert, I'm sure there'd be lots of benefit coming out of that. Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming into the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and Mary.